I've always had an interest in being a firefighter since as far as I can remember. When I was 15, I joined the local fire department as a fire explorer. I steadily got more involved with all sorts of calls and the department's day-to-day operations. My very first call was a medical assist for an elderly female that had fallen and broken her hip. I still remember the blaring of the air horns on the fire truck, the wail of the siren, and the dreadful cry of the Q2, knowing we were on the way to save the day. It was from that moment on that I knew this is what I wanted to do with my life. Granted, being a firefighter isn't what people think. You aren't out fighting giant blazes every night or rescuing cats out of trees, even though I have done it before, spraying water into the tree. They come out every time. Every day I got out of high school and headed to the firehouse. I studied books, I watched the videos, I wore the gear, I worked out like they did. I wanted to be just like them, and I had never been so sure of anything in my life. When I graduated high school, I went through the fire academy. For 16 long, tiring weeks of school, we had made it to the last week of academy. We had our final burn. This burn lasted about an hour. I made it about 45 minutes in, and my heart gave out. My partner was searching the closet, and I was waiting outside for him. I'm in the back of the ambulance getting IVs shoved up both my arms. They're cutting my clothes off me. I'm confused. They told me what happened, and I knew right then and there, this was the end. After being checked out at the hospital, I was released. I went to school the next day, only to have them tell me I was too much of a liability and they could not let me take the state exam. I was devastated. I moved to a small town where there was a little volunteer fire department. Everyone knew each other. I went up there one day and talked to the chief. I told him about what happened. He said if I knew my limits, he had no issue with me joining. I started out as a cadet. I washed the trucks, scrubbed the toilets, cleaned the station, etc. Within a month, my dedication and knowledge paid off. My chief saw how much I could do and how much I cared. I was promoted to a senior firefighter, meaning I was the lieutenant's right-hand man. I was pumped. The majority of calls we ran were medical calls and grass fires, a few minor car accidents and house fires every now and then. Note, for a volunteer fire department, you don't get paid to do what we do. You leave home, you leave work, you leave your family, all for nothing. I had been in the department for 3 months now. We had a period where we didn't have a single call for 3 weeks. Now, it's time for the story of the one call that still haunts me to this day. The reason I lose sleep and lay awake most nights. I will never, ever forget this call. The date was October 1st, 2014. Time, 22:01. I worked about 45 minutes away from the town I volunteered in. I was on my way home from work one night. I still had roughly 15 minutes of a drive left before I made it back to town. My pager was clipped to my sun visor and I heard it sound off. County Fire dispatched to Station 1, respond priority 1 for a single vehicle rollover on Highway 62 north of Country Road 3417. Timeout 22:01. I still had 15 minutes to go. I stepped on the gas some, knowing I was not going to make the first truck out. The road I was coming down was very hilly and curvy, but I drove it so much I knew it like the back of my hand. Usually, between an initial page out and the second page, a reminder pretty much, there's about a 10-minute delay. I didn't think this accident was too serious. I look down. I'm doing 110 miles an hour. I'm catching up with another firefighter that's coming from the same direction I am. Before I know it, dispatch comes over the radio. Same dialogue, except they say 2205. Now I know it's bad. I make it to the fire station within 2 minutes of the second page. The engine is already gone with 3 personnel on board. Myself and 2 others are at the station and get on the radio with incident command. We ask if they need more manpower out there, and they say yes. So we roll out with another truck. The call was about 2 miles outside of town. From the time we left to the time we got there was about 5 minutes. As we were approaching the scene, I see all of the lights. I'm looking around, but I see no vehicle. Not in the road, not in the ditch, nowhere. I jumped out of the truck and started putting on my gear. I see fellow firefighters grabbing the jaws of life. I was excited now. I have never been on an extraction before, except during training in school. I started speed walking up to them, only to have the lieutenant tell me that I'm going to see my first fatality tonight. I looked over his shoulder and finally saw it. The car was horseshoe around a tree. Not from a side impact either. It was on its side. The roof crushed in from the tree. I turned about as white as a piece of paper. I had never seen a fatality since I started my career. I turned my helmet light on and started walking around the car. The smell of blood was imminent. The gas tank was leaking. I'll never forget that smell. I shined my light through what little bit of the windshield there was and could still see the person's hand on the steering wheel, but that's all I could see. The tow truck got there and gently pulled the car down off of the tree. When the car touched the ground, the door swung open and the victim's arm flopped out of it. Blood everywhere. The roof of the car was even with the dashboard. This was a late 90s model Mustang hardtop. We knew that kind of roof had to be cut off in order for us to remove the body. When the state troopers got there, they asked if we could find any identification of the victim before we started doing anything. His wallet was miraculously in between his legs. My partner pulled the wallet out and opened it up before handing it to the trooper. It was his best friend, who had just turned 18 and was still in high school. He broke down right there. After he went and sat down at the fire engine, I heard a phone ring. It was coming from inside the car. We had started cutting the car apart so we could begin the process of removing his body for the JP to declare DOA. I was on the cutters. I cut the driver's door off and cut the A-pillar right at the dashboard. We began to roll the roof back, but a piece of the victim's scalp was hung up on the roof. When the roof caved in upon impact of the tree, his head was smashed and neck broke. His head was resting on his chest. We finished the extraction and removed the body from the vehicle. Brains, blood, and bone had gotten all over the backboard we used to transport the body from the wreckage to the road, approximately 45 feet to the road. Fatal wrecks have to have the road shut down for investigation. I go back to the wreckage to see if I can find the phone that was ringing. I see it hanging from the aux cord by the center dash. I grab it. He was listening to Hell's Balls by AC/DC, and his girlfriend had just texted him as I picked up the phone. The text read, "I love you so much. Text me when you get home. please be careful. I will never forget that. As we started wrapping up the scene, I hear a blood-curdling scream. I shudder as I thought maybe the body had come back to life. The family showed up unseen. The dad was a big, bulky gentleman. He was losing it. A person stuck in the traffic saw the car from a distance and called the family. The dad, mom, and little sister were all there, screaming at us, screaming at the medics, screaming at the police, asking why we weren't doing anything. It was that night that made me realize that all first responders can't save everybody. My speed getting to the station that night could very well have been me involved in an accident. From that night until now, I don't speed anywhere. All first responders have to see things like that on a daily basis, some worse than others. I never expected my first fatality to be that bad or gruesome, and I didn't want to share all of the details. Firefighting is a brotherhood. Everyone is there for each other. My brothers that were there that night were very supportive of me, and I was of them. For a couple of them, this wasn't their first, and definitely wasn't their worst, judging by the stories I've heard. But in the long run, we were all there to talk to each other about it and reassure that everything was going to be okay. I wasn't the only one affected by this call. I apologize for the long story, but whenever you see a first responder, whether it be a firefighter, a paramedic, or police officer, thank them for what they do. If you see the lights, pull to the right, because you never know what kind of call they are going to, or what they might have to see.